The first time I saw him, I was exhausted after a 12-hour shift at Lyaote, my feet aching. The restaurant's marble floors had been unforgiving, and my black uniform dress clung to my skin with the remnants of spilled wine and pasta sauce. I smelled like garlic and sweat, my honey-blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun that had long lost its shape. It was nearly midnight, and most of the other servers had left. I had stayed behind to help Marco, the owner, who had been kind enough to hire me 6 months ago when I'd arrived in Chicago with nothing but a suitcase and secrets that weighed heavier than any luggage. "Lily, take this to table 9, then you can go," Marco said, sliding a bottle of 30-year-old Macallan across the bar. "Last table." I nodded, too tired to speak, and lifted the silver tray. Table 9 was in the private alcove, a section reserved for patrons who didn't want to be seen. The kind who tipped well, but whose eyes you avoided meeting. The lighting dimmed as I approached, the plush carpet muffling my footsteps. A hushed conversation ceased the moment I appeared. And that's when I felt it, a shift in the air, like oxygen was being pulled from the room. 4 men sat around the table. 3 in dark suits who appeared to be cut from the same cloth. Broad shoulders, vigilant eyes, hands that never strayed far from their jackets. But the 4th man was different. He sat with his back to the wall, facing the entrance, a position I'd learned meant power. His suit wasn't just expensive. It was bespoke, molded to his frame like it had been created with him in mind. Charcoal gray against a crisp white shirt, the top button undone, as if even fabric didn't dare constrict him. His hair was as black as midnight, styled back to reveal a face that seemed carved from stone. All sharp angles and cold perfection. But it was his eyes that made me falter. Dark, bottomless. They fixed on me the moment I entered, tracking my movement with predatory focus, not leering like the businessman who sometimes patted my backside, but assessing, calculating, like I was a puzzle to solve or territory to map. "You're Macallan, sir," I said, placing the bottle down, careful to keep my hand steady. I felt his gaze burning into my skin as I arranged the glasses, wondering why the air suddenly felt too thick to breathe. "What's your name?" His voice was low, roughened at the edges, but cultured with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. I made the mistake of looking up. Our eyes met, and something electric shot through me, a warning flare from every cell in my body. "Lily," I answered, my voice smaller than I intended. His lips curved, not quite a smile. "Lily," he repeated as if tasting the word. "Like the flower?" I nodded, wanting nothing more than to retreat, to escape those eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Sir, would you like me to pour?" I asked, desperate to end this interaction. He leaned back slightly. "Please." My hands trembled as I broke the seal on the bottle, pouring amber liquid into crystal. His eyes never left me, making my skin prickle with awareness. When I finished, I stepped back, clutching the tray to my chest like a shield. "Will there be anything else?" I asked, addressing no one in particular. "That will be all, Lily," he dismissed me. But as I turned to leave, he added, "For now." I escaped to the back room, leaning against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. The intensity of his gaze had left me feeling exposed, as if he could see the secrets I kept buried. The reason I'd fled Boston, the reason I couldn't go back. "You okay?" Marco asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." "Who is that man?" "The one at table 9. Marco's expression changed, a flicker of fear crossing his weathered face. "Alexander Vulov. He owns half the north side." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And not the legal half. Don't catch his attention, Lily. Men like him, they take what they want." Too late, I thought, remembering the way his eyes had tracked me, marked me. I left through the back door 30 minutes later, pulling my threadbare coat tighter against the autumn chill. The alley behind Lay was poorly lit, puddles from the afternoon rain reflecting the yellow glow of a distant street lamp. My apartment was 15 blocks away, but I couldn't afford a cab. Not if I wanted to make rent next week. The sound of an engine purring to life made me freeze. A sleek black Mercedes idled at the end of the alley, its windows tinted to opacity. As I watched, the rear window rolled down, revealing that same devastating face, those same dark eyes. "It's late," Alexander Vyulov said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the night air. "You shouldn't walk alone." I clutched my purse tighter. "I'll be fine." That wasn't a suggestion, Lily. The car door opened. "Get in." Everything in me screamed to run. But where would I go? If Marco was right, this man owned these streets. So I approached the car, feeling like a moth drawn to a flame that would surely burn me to ashes. The interior was leather and warmth, the scent of expensive cologne mingling with something darker, something distinctly male. He sat across from me, one leg crossed over the other, studying me with those unreadable eyes. "Where do you live?" he asked. I hesitated, then gave him my address, watching as he relayed it to the driver without taking his eyes off me. "You're new to Chicago," he stated, not asked. 6 months, I admitted, wondering how he knew. "And before that?" My heart stuttered. "Boston. Running from something?" His question hit too close to the truth, making my breath catch. "Just looking for a fresh start." His lips curved again, that same not quite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone who comes to this city is running from something, Lily. The question is whether it's worth running from." The car moved smoothly through empty streets, the silence between us charged with unspoken questions. I stared at my hands, at the chipped nail polish and calluses from months of carrying trays, aware of how rough they looked compared to his manicured perfection. "You work hard," he observed, following my gaze to my hands. "I have bills to pay." "No one to help me pay them," I said, looking up sharply. "I take care of myself." Something flashed in his eyes. Approval perhaps, or amusement. Admirable. Rare these days. The car slowed to a stop in front of my building, a crumbling brownstone with graffiti marring its facade. I reached for the door handle, eager to escape the confines of the car and the weight of his attention. "Thank you for the ride," I said stiffly. "Lily," my name on his lips made me pause. "I'll be seeing you again." It wasn't a question or even a promise. It was a statement of fact delivered with absolute certainty. I got out without responding, feeling his eyes on my back as I hurried up the steps to the entrance. Only when I was inside, with the door locked behind me, did I allow myself to breathe. That night, I dreamt of dark eyes and hands that could either protect or destroy. I woke sweating, tangled in cheap sheets, with the certainty that something had irrevocably changed. I was right. The next morning, a package waited outside my door. No card, no note, just an elegant box tied with a black ribbon. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a lily pendant on a silver chain, a perfect delicate flower captured in white gold and diamonds. A chill ran down my spine. He knew where I lived. He knew my name. And somehow, in the span of one brief encounter, I had caught the attention of a man who, according to Marco, took what he wanted. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that Alexander Volkov had recognized something in me that night. Not the secrets I was keeping, not yet. But something else, something that made him see me not just as a tired waitress with worn hands, but as a replacement for what he had lost. And that realization would change everything. 3 days passed without incident. No more gifts appeared at my door. No black Mercedes waited in the alley. I began to believe that perhaps I had imagined the intensity of our encounter, that Alexander Vyulov had forgotten me as quickly as he had noticed me. Until Friday night, when Leelanot was packed, a private event taking over the main dining room. I moved between tables with practiced efficiency, smiling mechanically at guests who barely registered my existence. My feet ached, my lower back burned, but I kept moving. Tips would be good tonight, and I needed every dollar. "Lily." Marco appeared beside me, his face tense. "Table 9. Now." My stomach dropped. "Can't Sophia take it?" "I have 3 tables waiting for," he asked for you specifically. Marco's eyes held a warning. "Don't keep him waiting." I handed my tray to another server and made my way to the alcove, each step heavier than the last. The pendant he had given me hung around my neck, hidden beneath my uniform. I hadn't wanted to wear it, but something told me it would be dangerous to reject his gift. He sat alone this time, no associates surrounding him. A single glass of amber liquid sat untouched before him, and his eyes found mine the moment I entered, as if he had been waiting, counting the seconds until I appeared. Mr. Vulov, I said, keeping my voice professional, distant. Alexander, he corrected, the hint of accent curling around the syllables. Sit, Lily. It wasn't a request. I glanced around nervously. I'm working. Not anymore. Not tonight. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Marco understands. The implication was clear. Marco had no choice but to agree. Neither did I. I sat, perching on the edge of the chair, ready to flee, though I knew there was nowhere to run. You're wearing it, he said, his eyes dropping to my collar where the chain disappeared beneath the fabric. My hand instinctively rose to my throat. How did you? Your posture changed when you came in. Your hand kept drifting to your neck. You're aware of its weight. His observation was precise, leaving no room for denial. I said nothing, unnerved by his scrutiny. Why did you accept it? The question caught me off guard. I didn't want to be rude. A low chuckle escaped him, the sound oddly warm for such a cold man. You're afraid of me. Should I be? His eyes darkened. Yes, he said simply. But not for the reasons you think. Before I could ask what he meant, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing my cheek. I flinched, unable to help myself. Someone hurt you, he observed, his voice hardening. In Boston. I pulled back, panic fluttering in my chest. I should get back to work. Tell me his name. There was danger in his tone now, a promise of violence that made my blood run cold. It doesn't matter. It's in the past. I stood, needing distance. Please. I need this job. I can't sit down, Lily. Again, not a request. You misunderstand. Your job is not at risk. Reluctantly, I sank back into the chair. In fact, he continued, I have a proposition for you. One that would solve your financial concerns. I'm not that kind of waitress, I said sharply. For a moment, he looked genuinely surprised. Then something like respect flashed in his eyes. I'm not offering to pay you for sex, Lily. I'm offering you a job. I have a job. One that has you living in a building with broken security and walking home alone at night. His jaw tightened. I need a personal assistant. Someone discreet, hardworking, someone who understands the value of loyalty. I stared at him, disbelief warring with suspicion. Why me? You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. I know you're 26 years old. I know you left Boston 4 days after filing a police report that was mysteriously withdrawn. I know you've been working 2 jobs since you arrived in Chicago and sending money to a P.O. box in Massachusetts every month. My blood turned to ice. You've been investigating me. Researching, he corrected, as if the distinction mattered. I don't take risks, Lily. Not with who I allow close to me. And what makes you think I want to be close to you? His lips curved in that not quite smile. The salary is 3 times what you make here. The hours are irregular, but the benefits substantial. You would have an apartment in my building. Security. Protection. Protection from what? From whoever you're running from. His eyes locked with mine. From whoever put that look in your eyes. I should have said no. Should have walked away from the table, away from those penetrating eyes that seemed to see too much. But when Alexander mentioned the salary, 3 times what I made at the restaurant, all I could think about was Maddie, about the mounting medical bills and the treatment she needed. I'll need to think about it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, thick cream-colored stock with only a phone number embossed in black. You have until tomorrow night. He placed it on the table between us, then stood. I don't like to be kept waiting, Lily. I watched him leave, his movements fluid and controlled, like a predator confident in its territory. Only when he was gone did I realize I had been holding my breath. Marco appeared at my side almost immediately. What did he want? He asked, his voice hushed with fear. He offered me a job, I said, still staring at the door Alexander had disappeared through. Marco's face paled. What kind of job? His assistant. Relief washed over Marco's features. That's not what I expected. He hesitated. But Lily, men like Volkov, they don't separate business from pleasure. If he wants you as his assistant, he wants you in other ways, too. I knew Marco was right. The way Alexander looked at me wasn't purely professional. There was hunger there, a possessiveness that both terrified and, if I was honest with myself, thrilled me. But I couldn't afford to be thrilled. Not with everything at stake. I haven't said yes, I told Marco, tucking the card into my pocket. But even as I said it, I knew what my answer would be. For Maddie, I would do anything, even make a deal with the devil. I finished my shift in a daze, mechanically serving drinks and collecting plates, all while feeling the weight of the business card in my pocket. By the time I left, the night air had turned bitter with cold, a reminder that winter was coming. Winter meant higher heating bills, more medicine for Maddie's weak lungs, expenses I could barely cover with 2 jobs. The walk home seemed longer than usual, shadows stretching from alleyways like fingers. Twice I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, there was only emptiness. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My apartment was cold and dark, the ancient radiator making more noise than heat. I turned on the single lamp beside my bed, its weak glow doing little to dispel the gloom. Then I took out the business card, running my thumb over the raised numbers, feeling the quality of the paper. 3 times my salary. An apartment with security. Protection. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I called every Thursday night. Hello. The voice on the other end was thin, fragile. Hi, Mrs. Peterson. It's Lily. How is she today? There was a pause, the sound of movement. She asked for you again. Wanted to know when you're coming home. My heart constricted. Can I talk to her? She's sleeping now. The new medication makes her drowsy. Mrs. Peterson's voice dropped. Lily, the doctor called. They're recommending a specialist. In Chicago, actually. But the cost, how much? I asked, already knowing I couldn't afford it. When she told me the figure, I closed my eyes, despair washing over me. It was impossible. Unless I'll figure it out, I promised. Tell Maddie I'll call again on Sunday. After hanging up, I sat on my bed staring at Alexander's card. Then, with shaking fingers, I dialed. He answered on the first ring. You've decided. Not a question. As if he had been expecting my call, waiting for it. Yes, I said, the word catching in my throat. I accept your offer. Good. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Be ready at noon tomorrow. Someone will come for you. What should I bring? Nothing. Everything will be provided. The call ended abruptly, leaving me with the realization of what I had just done. I had agreed to work for a man I barely knew. A man who, by all accounts, was dangerous. A man who had investigated me, who seemed to know about my past, but not everything, I reassured myself. He couldn't know everything. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, haunted by dark eyes and the phantom sensation of fingers brushing my cheek. When dawn finally broke, I was already awake, watching the pale light seep through my threadbare curtains. At exactly noon, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find a tall, broad-shouldered man in a suit, his expression impassive. Miss Lily Chen, he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so imposing. I nodded, clutching my small bag. Despite Alexander's instructions to bring nothing, I couldn't leave behind the few precious items I owned, the photograph of Maddie, the locket from my mother, and the envelope containing what little savings I had managed to accumulate. I'm Dmitri. Mr. Volkov sent me to escort you. He eyed my bag but said nothing, instead gesturing toward the stairs. The car is waiting. And it wasn't the Mercedes from before, but a sleek black SUV, its windows tinted against prying eyes. Dmitri opened the rear door for me, and I slid in, half expecting to find Alexander inside. But the car was empty, save for the driver, a young man who nodded to me in the rearview mirror. We drove in silence, leaving my neighborhood behind, traveling deeper into the city's affluent north side. The buildings grew taller, cleaner, the streets wider and better maintained. Finally, we pulled up in front of a towering glass structure that gleamed in the midday sun. Monarch Tower, Dmitri said, noticing my awe. Mr. Volkov owns the top 10 floors. The lobby was all marble and crystal with a security desk manned by two men who looked more like soldiers than doormen. They nodded respectfully to Dmitri as he led me to a private elevator at the back of the lobby, accessible only with a key card. Your new home, Dmitri said as the elevator ascended silently, is on the 48th floor. Mr. Vulov resides in the penthouse, floors 50 through 52. The elevator opened directly into a hallway with only two doors. Dmitri led me to the one on the left, unlocking it with a key card, which he then handed to me. This is yours now, he said. Mr. Volkov will see you at 6 o'clock tonight on the 51st floor. I'll come for you at 5:45. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in what could only be described as a dream apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city and Lake Michigan beyond. The furnishings were modern but comfortable in shades of cream and soft blue. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances, and when I opened the refrigerator, I found it fully stocked. But it was the bedroom that left me speechless. Larger than my entire previous apartment, it featured a king-sized bed with linens that looked softer than anything I had ever touched. The walk-in closet was filled with clothing, dresses, suits, casual wear, all in my size. Designer labels I had only seen in magazines hung in neat rows, organized by color and occasion. In the bathroom, I found every toiletry I could possibly need, including high-end cosmetics and perfumes. It was as if someone had anticipated my every desire, my every need, or as if someone had studied me very carefully. The thought sent a chill down my spine. I returned to the living room, trying to process the sudden change in my circumstances. From a cramped apartment with unreliable heat to this luxury beyond anything I had ever experienced, all because a dangerous man had noticed me. What did he really want from me? I spent the afternoon exploring my new home, finding a study equipped with a state-of-the-art computer, a balcony that offered vertigo-inducing views, and even a small gym. Everything was perfect, pristine, too perfect. At precisely 5:45, a knock came at my door. Dmitri stood waiting, his expression as unreadable as before. Mr. Vulov is expecting you, he said. I had chosen one of the simpler outfits from the closet, a charcoal grey pencil skirt and ivory blouse with low heels that were comfortable enough to run in if necessary. My hair was pulled back into a neat bun, my makeup minimal. I wanted to look professional, not like someone trying too hard to impress. Dmitri led me back to the elevator, using a different keycard to access the 51st floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into another world entirely. The entire floor appeared to be one vast space, divided not by walls, but by changes in elevation and subtle architectural cues. A sunken living area with leather sofas faced a fireplace large enough to stand in. Beyond that, a dining table that could seat 20 stretched beneath a chandelier that must have cost more than a year's salary at La Bella. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire perimeter, offering a 360 degrees view of Chicago. And there, standing at one of those windows, was Alexander. He turned as we entered, his dark gaze finding me immediately. Today he wore a navy suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his body. His hair was slightly damp, as if he had recently showered, and the scent of his cologne, something woodsy and rich, reached me even across the distance between us. Leave us, Dmitri, he said, not taking his eyes from me. Dmitri disappeared silently, the elevator doors closing behind him with a soft chime. Do you like your new accommodations? Alexander asked, moving toward me with the fluid grace I remembered from our previous encounters. It's overwhelming, I admitted. And far more than I was expecting. He gestured for me to follow him to the living area, indicating that I should sit. I perched on the edge of one of the sofas, watching as he poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter. You'll get used to it, he said, handing me one of the glasses. Our fingers brushed and I felt that same electric jolt as the first night we met. I want you comfortable here. Your position requires you to be on call. Accessible. I took a sip of the drink. Expensive bourbon, smooth and warming. And what exactly is my position, Mr. Vulov? You mentioned a personal assistant, but what does that entail? He sat across from me, one ankle resting on the opposite knee, the picture of relaxed power. Alexander, he corrected again. And your duties will vary. Managing my schedule, handling correspondence, accompanying me to certain events. I have business interests that require discretion. What kind of business interests? I asked, though I knew from Marco's warnings and the security surrounding this building that Alexander Volkov was not simply a legitimate businessman. His lips curved in that not-quite smile. The kind that don't concern you. Your job is not to ask questions about my business, Lily. It's to do as I ask when I ask it. And if what you ask crosses a line. His eyes darkened. I'm not going to ask you to break the law, if that's what you're worried about. I have others for that. The casual admission sent a shiver through me. Confirmation of what I had already suspected. I was working for a criminal, a powerful, dangerous criminal who, for reasons I still didn't understand, had singled me out. Why me? I asked again, needing to understand. You must have access to countless qualified assistants, professional ones. Alexander set his glass down, leaning forward, his eyes never leaving mine. 6 months ago, I lost someone very important to me. My previous assistant, Elena. She was killed. The blunt statement hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken implications. I'm sorry, I said, unsure how to respond. She was more than an assistant, he continued, his voice hardening. She was family. And she was betrayed by someone I trusted. Family? The word seemed at odds with the cold, calculating man before me. When I saw you at the restaurant, you reminded me of her. Not physically. Elena was dark where you are light. But something in your eyes, the way you carry yourself. Resilient despite whatever burden you're carrying. I swallowed hard, unnerved by his perception. I still don't understand what you want from me. Loyalty first and foremost. Discretion. Competence. He paused, his gaze intensifying. And eventually, trust. Trust is earned, I said quietly. For the first time, a genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his face from something cold and remote to something startlingly human. Yes, he agreed. It is. He stood, moving to a desk on the far side of the room, returning with a folder which he handed to me. Your contract. The terms are generous, as I promised. Read it carefully. I opened the folder, scanning the document inside. The salary made my breath catch. Not 3 times what I made at Labella, but 5 times, plus benefits, including health insurance that would cover dependents with pre-existing conditions. My heart stuttered. Did he know about Maddie? The insurance, I said carefully. It mentions dependents. Do you have a dependent, Lily? He asked, watching my reaction closely. I hesitated, torn between the need for secrecy and the desperate hope that this could be the solution to Maddie's medical needs. My sister, I finally admitted. She's sick. That's why I send money to Massachusetts every month. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes, as if I had confirmed a suspicion. The insurance will cover her. Whatever she needs. Relief washed over me, so intense it left me lightheaded. With this job, I could provide Maddie with the specialist, the treatments, everything she needed. But at what cost? I signed the contract that night, my signature a promise sealed in ink. As Alexander watched me, his dark eyes gleaming with satisfaction, I felt a strange mix of relief and trepidation. I had solved one problem, Maddie's care. But had I created another? You start tomorrow, Alexander said, taking the signed document. Dimitri will brief you on security protocols, and my current assistant, Irina, will handle the transition. Current assistant? I asked, surprised he hadn't mentioned another assistant before. Irina is temporary. She handles the business side only. His gaze lingered on my face. You will have different responsibilities. The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely from fear. I assume one responsibility is attending dinner, I said, gesturing to the elegant dining table where 2 places had been set. A hint of amusement touched his lips. Perceptive. Yes, I thought we should discuss your duties over a meal. He moved toward the table, pulling out a chair for me. I find conversations flow more naturally over good food and wine. Dinner was an elaborate affair, served by a private chef who appeared and disappeared with silent efficiency. The food was exquisite, seared scallops followed by a perfectly cooked steak, accompanied by wines I couldn't begin to identify, but knew must cost more than a week's salary at my old job. Throughout the meal, Alexander outlined my responsibilities. Managing his personal schedule, coordinating with his security team, attending certain meetings and events with him, handling correspondence that required discretion. Nothing illegal, as he'd promised, but clearly designed to keep me close to him at all times. You mentioned Elena was killed, I said carefully, watching his expression. Is that why the security is so intense? His face hardened, the warmth that had begun to emerge during dinner vanishing instantly. Elena's death is not a topic for discussion. I should have backed down, but something pushed me to press further. If I'm stepping into a position that got someone killed, don't I deserve to know the risks? Alexander set down his wine glass with deliberate care. Elena wasn't killed because of her position. She was killed because someone wanted to hurt me. His eyes met mine, cold and dangerous. The risk to you depends entirely on how valuable you become to me. The implication was clear. The closer I got to him, the more of a target I would become. Yet, there was something else in his words. A layer of meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Why would someone want to hurt you through her? If she was just your assistant, I told you she was family. His voice was sharp enough to cut. My cousin. The only family I had left after my parents died. The revelation stunned me into silence. This dangerous man, this apparent criminal, had lost someone he loved, and now he had hired me because I somehow reminded him of her. The knowledge shifted something in my understanding of him. Added a dimension I hadn't expected. Grief, loss, humanity beneath the cold exterior. I'm sorry, I said softly. I didn't mean to pry. His expression softened fractionally. Yes, you did. You want to understand what you've gotten yourself into. He leaned back, studying me. Caution is wise, Lily, but remember, curiosity can be dangerous in my world. The warning hung between us as dessert was served, a delicate chocolate creation I barely tasted, too caught up in trying to navigate the shifting currents of our conversation. There's something else we need to discuss, Alexander said as the chef cleared our plates. Your sister's medical care. My head snapped up. How did you, the same way I knew about your police report in Boston? The P.O. box. Your 2 jobs. His tone was matter-of-fact. I have resources, Lily. And I make it my business to know everything about the people close to me. Maddie isn't part of this, I said quickly, protective instinct flaring. She's innocent. Of course she is. Something like gentleness entered his voice. Which is why I've arranged for her to be transferred to Chicago Memorial. The specialist there is the best in the country for respiratory conditions. I stared at him, disbelief warring with desperate hope. You can do that. I already have. He produced an envelope from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Transportation has been arranged for next week. She'll have a private room, round-the-clock care. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope to find documents confirming everything he'd said. Hospital admission papers, insurance details, even travel arrangements for Maddie and Mrs. Peterson. Why? I whispered, overwhelmed. Why would you do this? Alexander rose, moving to stand at the window, his back to me. For a long moment, he was silent, the city lights casting his silhouette in sharp relief against the darkness beyond. Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer, he said finally, his voice low. To feel helpless to protect them. I stood, drawn to him by the unexpected vulnerability in his words. Alexander. He turned and the expression on his face made my breath catch. Intense, possessive, almost hungry. Make no mistake, Lily. This isn't charity. Everything I give comes with a price. What price? I asked, suddenly very aware of how close we were standing, of the heat radiating from his body. His hand rose, fingers tracing the line of my jaw with feather-light precision. Loyalty. Absolute and unwavering. His touch moved to my throat, finding the lily pendant beneath my blouse, drawing it out. You belong to me now in ways you don't yet understand. The pendant gleamed against my skin, a beautiful chain or a beautiful collar. I should have been frightened by his words, by the possession in his touch. Instead, I felt something else entirely. A dangerous, inexplicable pull toward this man who could destroy me as easily as save me. I should go, I said, my voice unsteady. It's late, and you said I start tomorrow. He stepped back, releasing me from the spell of his proximity. Dimitri will escort you to your apartment. As if summoned by his name, Dimitri appeared from a side door I hadn't noticed before. Had he been there all along, watching our interaction? Good night, Lily, Alexander said, his eyes still burning with that strange intensity. Sleep well. I didn't sleep well. I lay awake in the luxurious bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening's conversations. Alexander had orchestrated everything, my job, my apartment, even Maddie's care, with calculated precision. He had investigated my past, learned my secrets, used my desperate situation to bind me to him. And yet, there had been moments of genuine emotion, glimpses of the man beneath the cold, controlled exterior, his grief for Elena, his understanding of my worry for Maddie, the flash of vulnerability when he spoke of helplessness. What had happened to him to make him both so powerful and so wounded? Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through windows I had forgotten to cover. At precisely 7, a knock at my door announced the beginning of my new life. Irina was nothing like I had expected. Tall, willowy, with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun and ice blue eyes that assessed me with clinical detachment. You're the replacement, she said, her Russian accent more pronounced than Alexander's. Follow me. She led me to the 49th floor, which appeared to function as Alexander's business headquarters. Unlike the residential luxury of the 51st floor, this space was designed for efficiency. A sleek, modern office with multiple workstations, conference rooms, and a central area where several people worked at computers. This is where I work, Irina explained, leading me to a desk near a large corner office. You will rarely be here. Your position is different. The way she said it made me uneasy. Different how? Irina's cool gaze ran over me. You will be with him always. Personal, not business. Her lips curved in what might have been a smile or a sneer. The last girl like you didn't last long. The last girl like me? You mean Elena? Something flickered in her eyes, surprised perhaps that I knew the name. No. After Elena, there was another. Natalia. She disappointed him. The implication sent a chill through me. What happened to her? She is gone. Irina shrugged, dismissing the subject. Now, your schedule. For the next hour, Irina briefed me on Alexander's daily routines, his preferences, the protocols for different situations. It was overwhelming, the level of detail, the absolute precision required. Alexander Volkov lived by strict rules, and he expected those around him to adapt accordingly. He doesn't like to be kept waiting, Irina said, echoing Alexander's words from our first meeting. He doesn't like surprises. He doesn't like questions about his business. Remember these things, and perhaps you will last longer than Natalia. By mid-morning, my head was spinning with information. Irina had just begun explaining the security protocols when the elevator doors opened, and Alexander himself stepped out, followed by 2 men I hadn't seen before. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Backs straightened, conversations ceased, all eyes lowered respectfully. It was like watching subjects respond to a king, I thought, or perhaps more accurately, a dictator. Alexander's gaze found me immediately as if drawn by some invisible thread. He crossed to where Irina and I stood, his movements fluid and purposeful. Irina, the Petrov documents. On your desk, sir. He nodded, then turned to me. Lily, how are you finding your first day? Before I could answer, one of the men who had accompanied him stepped forward, whispering something urgent in his ear. Alexander's expression darkened, a flash of cold fury crossing his features before his face settled back into its usual mask of control. Change of plans, he said, his voice tight. Lily, you'll be coming with me. Where? I asked, forgetting Irina's warning about questions. To my surprise, he answered. Hospital. There's been an incident with one of my men. His eyes held mine, serious and intent. This is your first test. I need someone I can trust in this situation. Someone who won't ask unnecessary questions or speak to the wrong people. I nodded, understanding the significance of what he was asking. He was taking me into his confidence, testing my discretion, my loyalty. I'll get my coat, I said. 10 minutes later, I was seated beside Alexander in the back of his Mercedes, speeding through the city toward Chicago Memorial. Ironically, the same hospital where Maddie would soon be treated. The coincidence wasn't lost on me, nor was the symbolism. The place that would save my sister was also the place where Alexander was testing my allegiance to him. One of my security team was shot last night, Alexander said, breaking the tense silence in the car. Maxim. He's been with me for 5 years. The personal connection surprised me. I'm sorry. Is he going to be all right? The doctors say his condition is critical but stable. His jaw tightened. He was off duty, walking home from a bar. 2 men approached him, asked for a cigarette, then shot him twice in the chest. A robbery? I asked, though I suspected it wasn't that simple. Alexander's eyes met mine, dark with controlled rage. A message. For me. The hospital was a flurry of activity when we arrived, but a path cleared for Alexander as if by magic. Staff members nodded respectfully, security guards stepped aside, and within minutes we were being escorted to a private room in the intensive care unit. 2 men in suits stood guard outside the door. Alexander's men, I realized, not hospital security. They nodded to him with deference tinged with fear. Inside the room, a man lay unconscious, connected to numerous machines that beeped and hummed in a symphony of survival. His face was pale, his breathing shallow despite the ventilator. He looked younger than I had expected, perhaps early 30s, with the muscular build of someone who had spent a lifetime in physical training. Alexander moved to the bedside, his expression softening as he looked down at his injured man. Gently, almost tenderly, he placed a hand on Maxim's shoulder. Find who did this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with lethal promise. Find them and bring them to me alive. I realized he was speaking to someone behind us, another of his men who had entered silently while my attention was on Maxim. Yes, sir. The man responded, then disappeared as quickly as he had come. Alexander stayed by the bedside for several minutes, speaking softly in Russian, words I couldn't understand, but whose meaning was clear in his tone. Comfort, reassurance, promise. It was another glimpse of the man beneath the ruthless exterior, the man who cared for those loyal to him, who inspired such devotion that his men would stand guard outside a hospital room despite their own vulnerability. As we left the hospital, I found myself studying Alexander's profile, trying to reconcile these contradictions. The man who threatened and possessed, who spoke of loyalty as if it were a commodity to be bought, yet who showed such genuine concern for those he considered his own. You're staring, Lily, he said, not turning to look at me. I'm trying to understand you, I admitted. He did look at me then, his eyes unreadable. Understanding isn't necessary. Obedience is. Is that what you wanted from Elena? From Natalia? Just obedience? The name Natalia seemed to surprise him. Irina has been talking. I see. She mentioned there was someone between Elena and me. Someone who disappointed you. His expression hardened. Natalia made a choice. The wrong choice. What choice? She betrayed my trust. His voice was cold. Final. That's all you need to know. The rest of the ride back to Monarch Tower passed in silence, but I could feel the tension radiating from him, a barely contained fury that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with whoever had ordered the attack on his man. Back at the tower, Alexander escorted me to my apartment door, an unexpected courtesy that left me uncertain. You did well today, he said, his anger apparently under control again. No unnecessary questions at the hospital. No visible reaction to Maxim's condition. Thank you, I said, unsure if it was actually a compliment to be good at hiding my emotions, at not asking questions. He stepped closer, invading my space in that way he had, making me acutely aware of his physical presence, his height, his strength, the scent of his cologne mingling with something darker, something uniquely him. There's a dinner tomorrow night. You'll attend with me. His hand rose to my face, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, the touch lingering. Wear the dress hanging in your closet. The blue one. I hadn't seen a blue dress, but I had no doubt it would be there, chosen by him, waiting for me like everything else in this new life he had constructed. What kind of dinner? I asked, finding my voice despite the disorienting effect of his proximity. The kind where appearances matter. His eyes darkened. Where everyone will be watching to see who stands by my side. There was meaning in his words I couldn't quite grasp, a significance beyond a simple business dinner. I had the distinct impression I was being presented, displayed as something more than an assistant. Alexander, I began, uncertain how to phrase my concern. Sleep well, Lily, he interrupted, stepping back. Tomorrow will be illuminating. As I watched him walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn deeper into a world I didn't understand, bound by invisible threads to a man who was becoming more enigmatic, more dangerous, and more compelling with each encounter. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that the dinner would change everything, that the secret I had been keeping, the one thing Alexander hadn't discovered in his investigation, was about to be exposed in the most public, most devastating way possible, and that Alexander Volkov, the man who owned half of Chicago's underworld, was about to discover the one thing that could make him my desperate slave. The blue dress was hanging in my closet the next morning, just as Alexander had said it would be, sapphire silk that flowed like water through my fingers, cut to accentuate curves I usually tried to hide. Alongside it hung diamond earrings and a matching bracelet that caught the light in dazzling fractals. A message delivered with silent efficiency. I was to be ornamental tonight, decorative, a beautiful accessory to complement Alexander Vulov's power. As I prepared for the evening, applying makeup with more care than usual, styling my hair in soft waves that framed my face, I couldn't help but wonder what game Alexander was playing. Why display me so publicly? Why dress me in clothes that transformed me from a practical assistant to something that looked remarkably like a lover? The thought sent a rush of heat through me that I immediately tried to suppress. Whatever was happening between Alexander and me, the lingering touches, the intense gazes, the undeniable pull I felt toward him, it couldn't become that. I had too much to lose, too many secrets still to keep. Dmitri arrived at precisely 7 to escort me to the penthouse. His eyes widened fractionally when I opened the door, the only indication that my transformation was noticeable. "You look lovely, Miss Chen," he said, his voice as gentle as always, despite his imposing stature. "Thank you, Dmitri." I smoothed nervous hands over the silk of my dress. Is Mr. Volkov ready? He's waiting for you." The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent, tension building in my chest with each floor we ascended. When the doors opened, I stepped into a scene from another world entirely. Alexander stood at the center of his vast living room, engaged in conversation with another man. Tonight he wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, the stark black and white emphasizing the powerful lines of his body. His hair was styled back from his face, revealing the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the strong set of his jaw. He looked up as I entered, and the conversation died on his lips. For a long moment, he simply stared, his dark eyes traveling over me with an intensity that made my skin warm beneath the silk. "Lily," he said finally, crossing to where I stood. "You look exquisite." Before I could respond, he took my hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and startlingly intimate. The press of his mouth against my skin sent electricity racing up my arm, pooling low in my stomach. "Come," he said, tucking my hand into the crook of his arm. "There's someone I want you to meet." He led me to the man he had been speaking with, tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. "Victor, this is Lily Chen." Lily, Victor Petrov, an old friend and business associate. Victor took my hand, his grip firm, his pale blue eyes assessing me with unsettling thoroughness. "A pleasure, Miss Chen. I've heard a great deal about you." I blinked in surprise. "You have?" A smile curved his thin lips. "Alexander rarely takes an interest in anyone. When he does, people notice." There was something in his tone that set off warning bells in my mind. A subtle insinuation perhaps, or a veiled threat. I glanced at Alexander, but his expression revealed nothing. "Victor owns several clubs downtown," Alexander explained, his hand settling at the small of my back, warm and possessive, and has other interests that occasionally align with mine. The euphemism wasn't lost on me. Viktor Petrov was likely another criminal, perhaps even a rival to Alexander. I should check on our transportation, Viktor said, his gaze moving between Alexander and me with keen interest. I'll see you both at the club. When he was gone, I turned to Alexander. What did he mean? He's heard a great deal about me. I've only worked for you for 2 days. Alexander's lips curved in that not-quite smile. Word travels fast in our circles, Lily. Especially when someone like me suddenly appears with a beautiful woman at his side. Is that what this is about? I asked, gesturing to the dress, the jewelry. You're presenting me as your, what? Girlfriend? Mistress? His eyes darkened. Would that be so terrible? The question caught me off guard, the sudden intensity in his gaze making my heart stutter. It would be a lie, I said finally. Would it? He stepped closer, one hand rising to cup my face, his thumb brushing lightly across my lower lip. There's something between us, Lily. Something you feel as strongly as I do. I couldn't deny it. The electricity that crackled between us whenever we were near, the way my body responded to his slightest touch. But I also couldn't afford to acknowledge it. Not with so much at stake. I work for you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That's all this is. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. For now, he said finally, stepping back. Come. We don't want to be late. The club was in the heart of downtown, a sleek, exclusive establishment with a line stretching down the block. We bypassed it entirely, Alexander's hand guiding me through a private entrance where more suited men nodded respectfully as we passed. Inside, the club pulsed with energy, dim lighting, throbbing music, beautiful people moving like shadows through the haze. But we didn't join the crowd on the main floor. Instead, Alexander led me up a spiral staircase to a mezzanine level, where private booths overlooked the dance floor below. Viktor Petrov was already seated in one of these booths, along with several other men and women who watched our approach with undisguised curiosity. They rose as Alexander neared, a gesture of respect that reinforced what I already knew. In this world, he was royalty. Alexander, one of the men said, stepping forward to clasp Alexander's hand. It's been too long, Mikhail. Alexander's greeting was cool, but not unfriendly. You remember my offer? The man, Mikhail, nodded, his eyes darting to me. We can discuss it later. Aren't you going to introduce your lovely companion? Alexander's arm slid around my waist, drawing me closer to his side. Lily Chen, my personal assistant. The way he emphasized personal left little doubt about the implication. Around the table, I saw eyebrows raise, glances exchanged. Assistant, Mikhail repeated, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Of course. We took our seats, Alexander positioning me beside him, his hand resting casually on my thigh beneath the table. The gesture was proprietary, intimate, a silent declaration to everyone present. This woman is mine. I should have been offended. Should have pulled away. Instead, I found myself leaning slightly into his touch, drawn by the heat of his body and the strange security I felt in his presence. The evening progressed in a blur of drinks, hushed conversations, and meaningful glances I couldn't quite interpret. I said little, understanding my role was to observe, not participate. Alexander, meanwhile, moved through these social waters with predatory grace, his charm deployed like a weapon when needed, his authority unquestioned. Dance with me, he said suddenly, rising and extending his hand to me. It wasn't a request, but a command delivered in front of his peers. To refuse would undermine whatever image he was cultivating, so I placed my hand in his, allowing him to lead me to a small dance floor adjacent to the private booths. The music had shifted to something slower, more sensual. Alexander pulled me against him, one hand at my waist, the other clasping mine. Our bodies close enough that I could feel the steady beat of his heart. You're quiet tonight, he observed, his voice low in my ear. I'm trying to understand what's happening, I admitted. Why you brought me here? Why you're presenting me as something more than your assistant? His hand tightened slightly at my waist. Perhaps because I want you to be more than my assistant. The admission hung between us, startling in its directness. I looked up at him, searching his face for some hint of manipulation, some sign that this was just another move in whatever game he was playing. What I saw instead sent a shiver through me, naked desire, unguarded for once, burning in those dark eyes. Alexander, I can't or won't. His thumb traced circles against my lower back, the touch sending heat spiraling through me despite the layers of silk and skin between us. Both, I whispered. You don't know everything about me. There are things you're afraid would change how I see you. He pulled me closer, his lips brushing my temple. There's nothing you could tell me that would make me let you go, Lily. Not now. The certainty in his voice terrified me because I knew he was wrong. There was one thing, one secret that would change everything. The very reason I had fled Boston. The reason I needed money for Maddie, the reason I woke gasping from nightmares. We continued to dance, my thoughts spinning in frantic circles. I was being drawn deeper into Alexander's world, into his arms, with each passing moment, and somewhere in the city, arrangements were already being made to bring Maddie to Chicago, to bring her into his orbit as well. I needed to pull back, to establish boundaries. To remember why I had taken this job in the first place. Survival, not romance. Especially not romance with a dangerous man who thought he owned me. The dance ended and Alexander led me back to the booth. As we approached, I noticed a new addition to the group, a man with sandy blonde hair and cold blue eyes who was watching our approach with particular interest. Alexander Volkov, the man said, rising, still picking up strays, I see. The atmosphere around the table instantly tensed, Victor and Mikhail exchanging alarmed glances. Alexander's body went rigid beside me, his hand tightening on mine to the point of pain. Callum Davies, Alexander replied, his voice glacial. I wasn't aware they had released you from prison. The man, Callum, smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good behavior. Though I hear the same can't be said for your cousin. Such a tragedy about Elena. The provocation was deliberate, designed to wound. I felt Alexander's rage like a physical force radiating from him. Controlled but lethal. You should leave, Alexander said, each word precise and dangerous. Before I forget we're in public. Callum's gaze shifted to me, a slow, insulting perusal that made my skin crawl. Aren't you going to introduce me to your new plaything? That's enough, Davies, Victor interrupted, standing. This is my establishment, and you weren't invited. Just paying my respects, Callum said, his eyes never leaving me. And satisfying my curiosity about the woman who's replaced poor Elena. And what was the other one? Natalia. Something in the way he said Natalia's name, a particular emphasis, a knowing glance, made ice form in my stomach. This man knew something about the woman who had disappointed Alexander. The one Irina had said was gone. Curiosity can be dangerous, Alexander said, echoing his warning to me from the night before, especially for someone in your position. Callum laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. My position is stronger than you think, Vulov. Things have changed while you've been mourning your cousin and collecting new companions. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving a charged silence in his wake. Who was that? I asked quietly as we watched him disappear into the crowd below. An enemy, Alexander said simply, his expression cold and closed again. One who just made a grave mistake. The remainder of the evening passed in tense conversation, the earlier playful atmosphere shattered by Callum's appearance. Alexander remained by my side, his body language protective, possessive, but his attention was clearly elsewhere, calculating, planning, perhaps even plotting revenge. It was nearly midnight when we finally left the club, sliding into the back of Alexander's waiting Mercedes. As soon as the door closed behind us, he pulled out his phone, dialing a number with sharp, angry movements. Find out how Davies got into the club, he ordered whoever answered. And I want to know where he's staying, who he's meeting with, everything. A pause. No, he threatened what's mine. This ends now. He ended the call, turning to me with eyes that burned with barely contained fury. I'm sorry you had to witness that. Who is he really? I asked. What did he mean about Elena? Alexander's jaw tightened. Callum Davies worked for me once. Before he betrayed me to a rival organization. Before he trailed off, pain flashing across his features. Before he gave them information that led to Elena's death. The admission stunned me. He's responsible for her murder. He provided the information that made it possible. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. And now he's back in Chicago, making threats. Watching you. Me. Why would he care about me? Alexander turned to me, his gaze intense, almost fierce. Because he knows what you are to me. Or what you're becoming. And what is that? I whispered, afraid of the answer, yet needing to hear it. He reached out, his hand cupping my face with surprising gentleness. Everything, Lily. You're becoming everything. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to face. Before I could respond, Alexander leaned forward, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more, hungry, demanding, possessive. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer as his mouth claimed mine with a desperation that matched the turmoil in my own heart. I should have pulled away, should have reminded him and myself of the professional boundaries between us. Instead, I found myself responding with equal fervor, my hands gripping the lapels of his tuxedo, my body arching toward his as if drawn by some primal magnetism. It was Alexander who finally broke the kiss, pulling back just enough to rest his forehead against mine, his breathing as uneven as my own. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you, he confessed, his voice rough. Standing in that restaurant, exhausted but unbowed, with eyes that held secrets and strength in equal measure. This complicates everything, I said, trying to hold on to rationality even as my body hummed with the aftermath of his kiss. Life is complicated, Lily. His thumb traced my lower lip, swollen from his kiss. But some things are simple. You're mine now. To protect, to cherish, to possess. The possessiveness in his words should have repelled me. Instead, it sent a shiver of something dangerously close to desire racing down my spine. In the short time I had known him, Alexander Vyulov had become a force in my life. Dangerous, yes, but also compelling, addictive. He had given me security, hope for Maddie, and a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since fleeing Boston. But at what cost? The car pulled up to Monarch Tower and Alexander escorted me to my apartment in silence, his hand at the small of my back, the heat of his touch burning through the thin silk of my dress. At my door, he paused, his eyes searching mine. I want you to come to Moscow with me. Next week. There's business I need to attend to, and I want you by my side. The request, command, took me by surprise. Moscow. But Maddie will be arriving, she'll be safe at the hospital. We'll only be gone 3 days. His hand brushed my cheek. Say yes, Lily. 3 days in Moscow. With Alexander, away from Chicago, from the complicated web I was becoming entangled in. It should have been an easy decision to refuse. Yes, I heard myself say instead, the words slipping out before I could reconsider. Satisfaction flickered in his eyes. He leaned down, pressing a brief, burning kiss to my lips. Good night, Lily. Dream of me. As I watched him walk away, I realized with startling clarity that I was falling for Alexander Vyulov, the man who had bought my loyalty, who had claimed me as his possession, who lived in a world of violence and power I still didn't fully understand. And I had 3 days before Maddie arrived, before we left for Moscow, to decide if I could trust him with my final, most dangerous secret. The secret that could turn everything between us to ash, or the one that could make this dangerous, powerful man my desperate slave. The week before our departure for Moscow passed in a blur of preparations and mounting tension. By day, I shadowed Alexander through meetings and phone calls, learning the intricacies of his legitimate businesses while carefully avoiding questions about his other enterprises. By night, I lay awake in my luxurious apartment, torn between anticipation and dread. Anticipation of Maddie's arrival. Dread of the moment when my two worlds would inevitably collide. Alexander and I existed in a strange limbo after that kiss in the car. He didn't press for more, but his touches lingered, his gaze followed me with undisguised hunger, and the air between us crackled with unresolved electricity. We were circling each other, both aware that once we crossed that final line, there would be no going back. 3 days before our scheduled departure for Moscow, my phone rang at midnight. The hospital. Maddie had arrived early. I dressed hastily, my hands trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear. After 6 months of separation, I was finally going to see my sister again. My fragile, innocent sister, who knew nothing of Alexander Vyulov or the web I had entangled myself in. As I emerged from my apartment, I found Dmitri waiting in the hallway. "Mr. Vyulov thought you might need transportation," he said gently, reading the surprise on my face. "He's already at the hospital." My heart stuttered. "He's there. With Maddie?" Dmitri nodded. He wanted to ensure everything was satisfactory for her arrival. The drive to Chicago Memorial passed in tense silence, my thoughts racing. What would Alexander think when he saw Maddie? Would he see what others had failed to notice? Would he connect the pieces I had so carefully kept separate? The hospital gleamed sterile and white under harsh fluorescent lights as Dmitri escorted me through empty corridors to the private wing where Maddie would be staying. Outside a room guarded by one of Alexander's men stood Mrs. Peterson, the elderly neighbor who had cared for my sister since our parents' death. "Lily," she exclaimed, embracing me. "Thank God you're here. The trip was exhausting for her, but the doctors say she's stable. And this facility. I've never seen anything like it. Your employer must be very generous." "Where is she?" I asked, peering past her to the closed door. "Inside with that handsome young man of yours. He insisted on making sure everything was perfect for her." My stomach knotted. Alexander was alone with Maddie. Now, while I stood outside, paralyzed with fear. "I need to see her," I said, pushing past Mrs. Peterson toward the door. The private room was larger than some apartments I'd lived in, fitted with state-of-the-art medical equipment that hummed softly in the background. A large window overlooked the city lights, and comfortable chairs surrounded the hospital bed where my sister lay, her thin frame almost lost among the plush blankets. And there, seated beside her bed, was Alexander. He was leaning forward, listening intently as Maddie spoke, her pale face animated despite the oxygen tube in her nose. They both looked up as I entered, and the smile that broke across Maddie's face was like sunrise after endless night. "Lily," she cried, her voice weaker than I remembered, but still achingly familiar.